Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and to my garden. It's Ann at Martin House Flowers. In today's video, I thought I would do a few garden related things in July as well as some non-garden related things. We did a couple day trips over the weekend. The first one being a trip to a nursery that's about close to an hour away, 45-50 minutes away, called Redbud Creek Farm, and it's a garden center, and it was a really beautiful country setting. And I was in search of just a new nursery and also looking for some annuals to replace some of my violas and pansies. And also for another day trip, Greg and I and the kids went down to Chicago for a day trip to the Science and Industry Museum. It's a pretty amazing, beautiful building, and there were some very cool exhibits in there that I thought I'd share with you in case you're interested in coming to visit Chicago and you want to do something fun with the kids and as well as educational. And then when I got back, you'll see that I didn't even get changed. I wanted to plant up the annuals that I picked up the day before at Redbud Creek Farm. So hope you enjoy this video. I had some July tasks to do in the garden, so thought I'd share that with you. And if you enjoy this, please comment and share and subscribe. Thanks for joining me today. So this nursery is located in a very forested area. We basically drove about 50 minutes through the cornfields and all the farmland that surrounds our town. And upon arrival, they have a lot of perennials, and as you see here, all of the boxwoods. Those are I think most of them are the Green Mountain boxwoods. There's a standard hydrangea, lots of panicle hydrangeas that are hardy in our zone here. They had this really sweet display of fairy garden items, and in that potting shed were all the little fairy garden supplies that you could get to create a fairy garden, which is obviously great for families. We don't have an old tree to put a fairy garden around. If we did, I think we might consider doing that. This is their cache area. It's really sweet in there. They had some stained glass and a lot of shade-loving perennials, plants, and a really amazing selection of hostas. In fact, my stepdaughter had picked out a couple hostas, but as I mentioned to her, we don't have that much space for hostas. We only have our east side of our garden, which are already full of hostas, heuchera, and some pulmonaria. So they had this little pond area here that was lovely. And I actually was in the lookout. We were in the lookout for that replacement fruit tree that I had showed you in a previous video, where our cherry tree succumbed to some kind of fungus disease. So I was just zooming in there. You could see the little waterfall in the background. They also had a nice collection of those campania structures or ornaments. They're out of my budget, unfortunately, so we didn't really pay too much attention to them. So on the other side of this native plant area and hostas, we did come across the trees and fruit trees, and I stopped filming when we had to start measuring height of trees to see if I could fit it into my small SUV So here are some beautiful natives, daylilies, which, as you know, I'm not that fond of daylilies, but yet I'm sure there are some beautiful varieties in there. And we did come across this little greenhouse of annuals, as well as these. I did ask her if she could recommend some annuals that loved heat, because I do have a couple window boxes. So that was my haul, my small haul. And this is a beautiful ride just exiting the garden center, and I asked my stepdaughter to film it. It's so pretty. Look at the sky. The clouds were just gorgeous. It was an absolutely perfect day after a morning of rain. Blue skies all the way home. So on Sunday, the whole family went downtown to Chicago, and we went to visit the Museum of Science and Industry. And Greg is quite the geek about science and airplanes and wartime history, all of that.
Millions of years ago, the earth cooled and steam condensed to rain. Those little droplets became our mighty oceans. It's what we're drawn to the ocean. Without it, no living creature would exist.
After our day at the museum, it was time for our long ride home. We're about an hour and a half west of Chicago. So, of course, after the long drive, I was able to recover from all of that walking and managed to catch some sunlight, daylight, and look at the plants that I had purchased the previous day. So here are the annuals I picked up. I got 3 for each of the window boxes. Originally, I thought of putting them back in the greenhouse, but I decided that I like this area right here on my potting bench. Amanda picked out that striped one. And those are all Portulaca. I don't know if any of you grow those, but they're extremely drought tolerant. This pot, I think we got it for free at the garden walk a couple weeks ago. And there's my alyssum from seed. I just direct sowed these seeds in these clay pots, and they've been coming up nicely here. It's just nice filler to put in clay pots that are, sort of a smaller side. And this was a hanging basket that I picked up at Redbud Creek yesterday. They were all half price, regular $32, so I got it for $16. And look at that beautiful topiary. They had a nice collection of topiary. I've been able to help my little myrtle topiary recover that I bought last fall. So this one is a rosemary topiary, so I think I can keep that one alive, hopefully. I'll bring it indoors when it gets too cool. And there's one of my garlic cloves that I had picked from the kitchen garden. I've been leaving it out here to dry, but of course it rained. So that it doesn't rot, I'm going to bring it into the greenhouse and let it dry out some more before I can break apart the stalk from the actual cloves. So I decided that I wanted to remove all of these violas and pansies. Later that evening, Greg saw it in my bin here, my Fiskars pop-up. In his opinion, they weren't ready to get pulled out, but I thought they were. What do you think? Anyway, he was mowing the lawn tonight, so I had to do a voiceover. And as you can tell, the sun was setting, and so the lighting is really, really beautiful. But I'm gonna look a little bit tanned and orange in some of this footage because the sun was starting to set. It was probably close to 7:30, 8 o'clock at this point in the evening. Since I didn't really have a spot for another hanging basket, I decided to just use this hanging pot of Verbena with one odd yellow calibrachoa in there. It was funny that there was just one, but it was the healthiest looking hanging basket at the garden center. So I decided to just pop it out of this hanging basket and use the entire arrangement or pot into this urn, and that way I had an instant floral container without having to wait for a bunch of plugs to grow in. And most of us probably there aren't very many annuals available out there, it seems. So, and being white, I thought it was nice and neutral, as I have some bright geraniums and annuals in this area, and once we start moving into fall, it'll be a nice neutral. So onto the window boxes that I was filling with the Portulaca. So Portulaca is a very heat tolerant annual, and I can't say I've ever grown it, but when I saw that they were at the garden center and they were very colorful, and I'd asked for a recommendation on an annual that was very heat and drought tolerant, they suggested these, and they looked really pretty and colorful. And the texture of Portulaca is very much like a succulent. It has, or a sedum. It has those very kind of rubbery, if you will, texture to them. And you'll see in a minute that I found a couple broken branches. So much like sedum, I thought I'm just going to pop them into the soil and maybe they'll root. So I had a friend back in Canada that used to love this annual and planted a lot of it. Honestly, it wasn't my favorite years ago, but I thought I'd give it a try because I was, kind of having a hard time finding available annuals at this late stage of the summer. So I thought I'd give it a try, especially since they were recommended as heat-loving annuals in case I decide to put the window boxes in the greenhouse. So there are the colors: sea glass plumberry and sea glass limon or lemon. Well, the battery on my camera just lasted till the end of my planting this container and completely shut down pretty much soon after I planted this container, so I wasn't able to film planting the second one. But clearly you get the idea. So I managed to plant these two window boxes, the urn, and that eucalyptus was also planted in my raised bed with all of my filler flowers. So I was happy to get that in the ground for the hour before the sun went down. So the next day, which is today, Monday, I wanted to take a look at the combination of flowers. So here are all the containers by the greenhouse. There's the white verbena. I'm really happy with that choice of a nice neutral white. And my snapdragons here, if I continue to cut those back, they do really well. They keep coming back again. So I also managed yesterday to put this trellis that was on the urn originally in between these two dahlia plants that are growing quite tall. In fact, one of the branches of the dahlia actually broke on the Joey Winnie. So I just anchored the two of them with some twine around that arbor. And here's the potting bench. I cleaned it up a little bit. I added some potting mix to these containers, used some biotone. That was the fertilizer I had on hand. I seem to have run out of the other flowering fertilizers, so I think they'll do very well there. They'll get morning sun and afternoon shade. And today I decided this morning to just go around and with my snips and just take a look at all of my containers and my roses. There's my forget-me-nots I planted from seed, and just do a once-over around the garden to see what kind of deadheading I needed to do in the month of July. I cannot believe we're coming up to the end of July. Greg managed to mow the lawn last night. There are my endless summer hydrangeas. You can tell some of the blooms are a little bit spent. So I started just doing a little bit of deadheading here, just getting rid of some of these spent blooms on my Bali hibiscus. I really like having white in the garden because it gives your eye a resting area. When you've got all of this color, I have a lot of hydrangeas, I have a lot of annuals in pink, and I really love this white hibiscus with the fuchsia pink center. It's just a nice, cool flower to look at, cool color to look at when you're in the heat of summer. And I can tell that this is a heat-loving plant, but I can see that there's a little bit of stress from the heat we've been having, because I don't remember having this many spent blooms, like really dried up. But typically on a Rose of Sharon or a hibiscus, the blooms only last a day, but there's just hundreds of blooms that just keep the plant continuously blooming until late summer. This just started blooming, I would say, mid-July. The marigolds on this container are blooming a little bit later than the ones on the other side of the driveway. That's really interesting to me. So there weren't any blooms here to deadhead. I'm really happy with that container. Both of these are doing really well. So this one here, I think, gets more direct sun. And this is a south-facing part of the garden. So I think this side, for some reason, gets the sun earlier. So I cleaned up this container at the front of the driveway into the path. Can you see that little grouping of lupins? I planted those from seed, and surprisingly, I had so many that I had broadcasted and repotted into little containers and planted them all around the garden, but unfortunately the bunnies loved them. So that little grouping there was the only ones that survived, and clearly they won't be blooming this year, I don't think. They're just not far enough along to bloom this year, I think. Maybe next year, because they're supposed to be a first-year bloomer for me in lupins. I got the seeds from Johnny's, so we'll see. I cut back this salvia. I've cut that back a couple times already, and it continues to grow. I had that salvia in one of my urns last year, and then at the end of the season just put it into the ground here. So it's done really nicely. It's just a generic salvia that I picked up at Lowe's last summer. And taking a look at Kiss Me Kate here, I'm seeing lots of new red growth, red foliage, which is a sign of new blooms to come. And there is a very long extended cane. So this is one of the annuals that I picked up, and it's a shade-loving annual. I've never seen this before. This is a Proven Winners. Let's see if I can get it to focus. It's called Endless Illumination, Broalia Hybrid, part shade to shade. It's an award-winning annual Endless Illumination Bush Violet is the common name. So it grows 12 to 16 inches tall. It likes shade to part shade. So I think being on the porch here, it's a mounded shape. It should do well. And there's that long cane of Kiss Me Kate I pulled down with one of the branches. So here's my dinner plate dahlia. And I'm noticing a lot of brown foliage around the bloom there, that first bloom. So dahlias will cut and come again. So I decided to just snip that spent bloom so that the energy wasn't being wasted on an older bloom. And as you can see, there's a lot of buds coming up. And some of the foliage at the bottom were a little concerning, so I cut those back as well. And there's my urn filled with the gomphrena, my coleus from seed back here. The salvia in the back is supposed to be a white salvia. Not seeing any blooms coming up yet, but healthy nevertheless. And just taking a look at my front bed here with the various dahlias that I planted with you. The tubers we pre-sprouted and put in the ground. Some zinnias up front there underneath the birch tree. The cat's meow nepeta making its second round of blooms. This is a spent dahlia bloom. Stolz von Berlin. There's a couple spent blooms there, so I thought I would just deadhead those or pinch them, whatever you want to call it. And that way we get more continuous blooms on this dahlia. That's supposed to be a ball dahlia, but it's certainly not looking like it. Maybe later blooms will look like it. There's Queen of Sweden. The first one on the left is looking good. The second one is definitely struggling. And this is Princess Alexandra of Kent. She was always my favorite cut flower in a rose. I remember her lasting more than a week, close to 10 days in a vase. So I decided to leave her because she was already kind of a mature bloom. And look at the Japanese beetles. Oh my goodness. I've seen one or two occasionally. So this is the first time I've seen two in a row. And look at the damage on the leaves that those beetles have been causing. So I came to cutting all of these back, and of course I went back into the garage to see what type of spray I had on hand. And in the meantime, I wanted to cut back all the spent blooms, not leave any diseased leaves on the ground. There's another Japanese beetle. It's certainly loving this Olivia rose. So in the garage, there's my 3 systemic products in one: fertilizer, insect control, and disease control. And that's supposed to help control black spot as well as the Japanese beetles. I did come and spread that around the base of all of my roses just a few days ago, just before the rain. And there's a neem oil Captain Jacks that I use on a new rose that had powdery mildew. There's dead bug, kills bagworms, lots of beetles. There's the insecticidal soap I used on my lemon tree when it got aphids. And then I have this Japanese beetle killer, kills by contact. So I took that over to the bed, decided to carry a container, just a pot that I could put all of the spent rose blooms into. And I'm just taking a look at all of these other shrubs here to see if I needed to attend to anything in that main bed. I started over here. taking a good look at Olivia Rose, looking at all of the blooms. So I did spray what little I had left in that Japanese beetle spray bottle, and to be honest, the best way that I have been successful in getting rid of the beetles is to just hand pick them. So that's what I did. I just hand picked whatever Japanese beetles I could get a look at, and I cut back all of the leaves that look diseased. I probably need to go back and look at that Olivia Rose again another day just to see what kind of damage, but I wanted to take a look at these beautiful new blooms of new dawn, my climbing rose at the arbor here. To be honest, it was getting quite warm and I was already working up a sweat, but what the heck, I decided I needed to just continue on with my deadheading and really take a look at what condition the roses are in. So this is David Austin's scepter dial, and it was eaten by the rabbits earlier this season, but it's making a comeback, and there's Eden with a lot of red foliage, which means that I should be seeing some blooms. Now it's a strong contrast to New Dawn on the other side. I often compare the two because they were planted at the same time, but Eden is certainly much slower than New Dawn. So there's a Princess Spirea that's not looking too healthy. I might have to replace her this fall with something else. It's not looking very healthy. And I did come back a few weeks ago and give all of my Spireas a haircut after their first bloom. So some of them are getting some reblooms. And here is Quickfire Fab. It's the first time that I'm seeing some of those rosy colored hues to the flowers, to the little florets, and that's usually a sign of cool evenings. Once the temperature starts to drop and get cooler at night, you'll start to see this rosy tint and then eventually sort of a deeper rosy red in the bloom colors. They start out white, lime green, and then they go a little rosier, and as the cool temperatures set in, as I mentioned, then they go a little darker. So there's Quickfire, which is a lower growing. It was planted just last year as a 1 gallon, and look how beautiful my Bennery's giant coral zinnias are doing. So beautiful. The stems are still pretty thin, so I'm not cutting on them. This is Little Lime. These are 4-year-old, and they are showing a little bit of stress with some of the yellow leaves, as you could see, and that could be from the heat. This is a west facing, so it gets morning shade and afternoon sun, and when it gets really intensely hot, I think it causes some of the foliage to go yellow. This is Carefree Wonder. She is so much of a wonder, the fact that she's recovered from the bunnies eating it every spring. And there's Tranquility, a bare root we planted together, and I do need to come in there and get a handle on all of this black spot that's starting on this. So I do have a spray bottle of copper fungicide. I didn't end up spraying this. Instead, I decided to cut back all of these bad leaves, these diseased leaves, and I definitely took a very good look at what was falling onto the ground and hand picked them and put them into a container to go in the garbage, because I do not want to leave any black spot debris in the ground, because that could get into the spores. And there's so much new growth on this plant, on this rose, that I'm feeling hopeful about it. I have a feeling that all of that black spot was from those couple days of rain that we had, And as you know, I never water overhead. My roses, I always water at the base to avoid this sort of issue. But we have had a couple days of rain, so that's probably the rain and the humidity can definitely equate to black spot. So I went along and cut back all of the diseased leaves. I wanted to point out these beautiful smaller zinnias. These are called Oklahoma salmon. To be honest, at first I thought they weren't necessarily the best cut flower because they're definitely smaller than a Bennery's giant. but some of the blooms are actually double blooms, and they're just so full and round. They almost look like a miniature dahlia. So I think I've changed my mind, and I do love these. Johnny's website also points out that Oklahoma salmon, or Oklahoma zinnias in general, have less chance of powdery mildew. So that's a great feature that I'm looking forward to, because sometimes later in the summer, with all of our heat and humidity, we do sometimes get powdery mildew. Now, mind you, I didn't get powdery mildew last year on any zinnias unless they were direct sowed. So all of these zinnias were started indoors, either in the greenhouse or under grow lights. I'm really happy with my cosmos this year. Last year, I couldn't keep up with them in terms of deadheading them, but this year I've used the blooms in pretty much all of my arrangements that have gone to the garden market in Sycamore. So with even cutting them in many arrangements, I decided today to cut back or cut a lot of stems, these longer stems, where the blooms were either just opening or somewhat open, and decided to do a casual arrangement of just cosmos for my kitchen table.